Hey there. Ever seen the news and thought, why is the government spending billions on something ridiculous while the country is drowning in debt? Yeah, it's like watching someone buy a gold-plated toilet while their house is on fire. People get furious, they panic, and honestly, who wouldn't? But here's the kicker. Almost every country on Earth is in debt. Yep, you heard that right. India, Germany, Switzerland, even Qatar. The land of luxury cars and skyscrapers in the desert. They're all in debt. And it's not just small countries. Big, rich nations are drowning in it too. Japan owes twice its entire economy. The US owe just a casual $36 trillion debt and counting. That's not just a number. That's a number with 12 zeros. Sounds crazy, right? So, why are countries in so much debt? Why don't they just print unlimited money? Is debt really that bad? And who are they even borrowing from? Can a country ever be debt-free? Well, grab a snack, sit back, and let's dive into the world of national debt. All right, let's start with the basics. What exactly is national debt? If we're talking about a country's debt, we call it national debt. But it's also known as public debt, government debt, or sovereign debt. Basically, it's the total amount of money a federal or central government owes. Think of it like this. When you need money, you might take out a loan, right? Well, governments do the same thing. But instead of borrowing from a single bank, they get loans from all sorts of places. Other countries, big financial institutions, and even their own citizens. Here's the thing. National debt only includes the federal or central government's debt. So, for example, the U.S. national debt doesn't include debts from states like California or Texas. Nope, those are separate. And it definitely doesn't include your personal debt, like your credit card bills, student loans, or that mortgage you're still paying off. So, now that you know what national debt is, your next question is probably, why do countries borrow money in the first place? Let's break that down in the next section. Okay, so why do governments borrow money? I mean, they can just print it, right? Why not print unlimited cash and call it a day? Well, here's the problem. Printing too much money leads to hyperinflation. That's when prices go crazy, and money becomes almost worthless, like what happened in Venezuela and Zimbabwe. Borrowing, on the other hand, keeps governments in check. Since they have to pay it back with interest, it forces them to spend more responsibly. So, why borrow? Let's break it down. 1. To cover budget deficits. Governments earn money mostly from taxes, but sometimes it's not enough. If they collect $3 trillion but need $4 trillion, there's a $1 trillion gap. Options? Cut spending, less services, raise taxes. People get angry. So, the easiest way? Borrow. 2. To invest in growth. Borrowing helps build things like roads, schools, and hospitals now, instead of waiting years. That boosts the economy and improves lives sooner. As the economy grows, so does tax revenue, making it easier to pay off the debt later. 3. To handle crises in emergencies like wars or pandemics, borrowing is often the only option. In 2020, the U.S. borrowed $3.8 trillion for COVID relief. Without it, things could have been way worse. 4. To pay off old debt, yes. Governments also borrow to repay old loans. It's like taking a new loan to pay off the last one. As long as they manage it wisely, it's fine. But if it gets out of control, like Sri Lanka in 2022, it can cause serious chaos. 5. To control inflation and interest rates, sometimes borrowing is a tool. Governments can use bonds to pull money out of the economy or pump more in, depending on what's needed. Now that you know why countries borrow, the next big question is, who's lending them all this money? Let's find out next. All right, so governments often take on billions, sometimes trillions, of dollars in debt. And you might be wondering, which bank has trillions of dollars just lying around? Well, the government doesn't just borrow from one source. They borrow from 3 main sources: domestic lenders, foreign lenders, and central banks. Let's break it down. Domestic lenders. Did you know you can lend money to your own country? Yep, it's called buying bonds. When you buy bonds or treasuries, you're lending your money to the government, and they'll repay you with interest. So, local citizens, like American citizens, can buy U.S. Treasury bonds. But it's not just individuals. Local banks, like Bank of America, can also buy U.S. bonds. Even companies and government agencies can buy bonds. In fact, about 20% of the U.S. national debt is intra-governmental debt, meaning one part of the government is lending to another. Foreign lenders. Not only do locals buy bonds, but foreign citizens and banks can too. For example, German citizens or German banks can buy U.S. Treasury bonds. Foreign governments also buy bonds from other countries, usually as an investment to earn interest. Japan and China are the largest holders of U.S. Treasury bonds, each owning around 700 billion and 700 billion and 1 trillion, respectively. But if a country's economy isn't strong, most foreign governments won't buy its bonds because they don't trust that the country can pay them back. Central banks' governments can also borrow from their own central banks. This is called debt monetization, where the central bank prints new money and uses it to buy government bonds. But most countries don't do this anymore because it can cause hyperinflation. Instead, central banks buy government bonds indirectly by purchasing them from commercial banks. This is mostly done to control interest rates and inflation, not to lend money to the government. Now that we know who lends money to countries, let's tackle the big question. Is national debt a bad thing? Is national debt a bad thing? Well, not really. Debt can be good or bad, depending on how it's used and whether a country can manage it properly. Debt can be beneficial if used wisely. For example, when governments borrow to build infrastructure and public services, it can boost the economy. In times of crisis like COVID-19, borrowing helps stabilize the economy and support businesses. But too much debt is dangerous. If a country keeps borrowing just to repay old debt, they fall into a debt trap. When debt grows too large, a country spends more on interest than essential services like healthcare and education. If investors lose confidence, they doubt whether the country can repay its debt, which lowers its credit rating. Yes, countries have credit ratings, just like your credit score at the bank. A bad rating makes borrowing harder, so investors stop lending or demand higher interest rates, leading to a debt crisis and possible default. So how much debt is too much? One way to measure it is the debt to GDP ratio, which compares a country's total debt to the size of its economy. Many economists consider 60% or lower a safe level, but it's not a strict rule. Now that we know when national debt is good or bad, your next question might be, can a country ever be 100% debt-free? Let's find out in the next section. Can a country be debt-free? Technically, yes. But in reality, almost no country is completely debt-free. And for most economies, being debt-free isn't even a good idea. The closest example of being debt-free is Macau. But here's the catch. Macau isn't a country. It's a special administrative region of China. Macau can afford to be debt-free because it's tiny, with just around 700,000 people, and it earns billions from casinos, even more than Las Vegas. But even if a country could be debt-free, most don't even try. Completely eliminating debt would mean massive spending cuts or huge tax increases, both of which could slow down economic growth and trigger massive protests. No government debt also means no government bonds, which would remove a critical safe investment option. Most pension funds rely on government bonds as a low-risk way to grow money for retirement. Without bonds, pensions would be forced to invest in riskier assets, making retirements less secure and financial markets more volatile. So, in conclusion, debt is actually a double-edged sword. Used wisely, it can help a country grow and thrive. Used recklessly, it can lead to economic disaster. So next time you hear someone ask, "Why does our country have debt?" you'll know the answer. It's not about having debt, it's about knowing how to manage it. And hey, if you found this video helpful, Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. If you want me to make more videos explaining these topics, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.